learners. I'm Z Kwesha from Sakikamva. I'm teaching economics. Today I want us to look at multiplier. From grade 10, grade 11 and grade 12, secular flow was taught. But when you come to grade 12, you discover that there's more to it. We also include multiplier. I want us to look at it. Now, when you talk of multiplier, one thing you need to remember is the leakages as well as the injections. That's where we're going to start. Now, if the economy is in equilibrium, your leakages will be equal to your injections. But now, if the leakages exceeds the injections, your L stands for leakage, and then they exceed, it means they are more than the injections. The national income will decrease as more money leaves the secular flow. A lot of money is leaking. Now, if the injections exceeds the leakages, now it's another situation. It's like this. Now the injections are more than the leakages because there's additional demand, which also leads to more production. Now, when the government increases its spending, for example, by building new roads, that is an injection. And that is indicated or denoted by a symbol G. You will remember capital letter G stands for government expenditure. What happens now will be this. Now let's look at this example. You are given 10 million for road construction. Now it will lead to the following. You remember, we use a system of tenders today. Now one wins a tender, and then he is promised 10 million. Now the first thing that he or she is going to do, she will have to employ aqesha abantu to work with him. Now that's a creation of jobs. Now that leads to increase in demand for goods and services, which also leads to increase in production of goods and services. Now, once there's increase in production, then that means, the suppliers or the businesses or the producers will have to hire more. Now, the employment goes even further and further. Now, one thing that you need to know as a learner in grade 12, as you might have seen in most question papers, you will be asked to define the multiplier. Even if you find it in section A, in that 1.3.1, you see that last part, which normally has 6 marks, you will find a definition, or you might find a definition of a multiplier there. Now, how then do you define a multiplier? Now, a multiplier refers to a small increase in spending, leading to a proportionally large increase in the national income. Now, once there's an increase in spending, that results or that causes a proportional large increase in national income. Now, one may say it is the ratio that is used to calculate the difference between the initial change in spending resulting to a change in income of the economy. Now, multiplier depends on a number of things that I want us to note. Now, it depends on the MPC. The MPC stands for the marginal propensity to consume. Now, when we talk of the marginal propensity to consume, it is that proportion of an increase in income that the consumer wishes to spend. Now, on that note, I also need to mention what we know, or what is known as the induced consumption, which is denoted as a small letter C with a capital letter Y. Now, induced consumption, it is that consumption that depends now on your income. Now, your multiplier, let me correct something here. I don't know what's happening to my screen. Yes, that's where we were. Now, we were saying the multiplier depends on the MPC. Now, I was still mentioning the question of the induced consumption. I was saying, now when you talk of the induced consumption, you talk about that consumption that depends on your income. Now, when your income increases, one may be tempted to buy more or to spend more. Now, that is referred to as an induced consumption. Now, your multiplier also depends on the marginal propensity to save, which is indicated as a small letter MPS. Now, it's your MPC, it's your, looking at what's happening here, it's your MPS, which is your marginal propensity to save. Now, that proportion of an increase in income that the consumer now wishes to save, that part that you choose to save on your increase in income. It also depends on the marginal rate of taxation. Now, there is that proportion of your income that is taxed. It's what we call marginal rate of taxation. You write MRT in small letters. Now, it also depends on your marginal propensity to import. Now, marginal propensity to import is your MPM, small letters, remember, my good learners. Now, that proportion of an increase in income which the consumers spend on imports. Some of us, they have enough money such that they buy goods from other countries. That is what we refer to as marginal propensity to import. Now, you might find a question that says, what is the relationship between the MPC and the multiplier? Now, if your MPC is high, your multiplier will also be high. If your MPC is low, your multiplier will also be low. That's why we say the higher the multiplier, the higher the MPC, the higher the multiplier rather. Now let's come to the calculation of the multiplier, which is very important. There's always 4 marks for the calculation of the multiplier. And the first thing that you need to know when we talk of the calculation of the multiplier is the formula. Just before I come to the formula, let me give you this scenario. Now, if, for example, for every 100 Rand increase in your income, you spend 60 Rand, save 10 Rand, pay tax of 10 Rand, and import goods for what? For 20 Rand. This is what will happen. Now, to get your MPC, you just divide your 60 Rand by 100, and you get your 0.6. You divide again to get your MPS. Remember, we said you save 10 Rand, it's 10 Rand over 100 Rand, and then you get your 0.1. And then again, you've got your marginal rate of taxation, which is 10 over 100, you get your 0.1. And then again, you've got your marginal propensity to import, which is your MPM, your 20 Rand divided by 100, you get your 0.2. Because it is important for us to know where these, decimal, numbers coming from. They come from this. This is how you get them. Now, you need to know the formula. There's 2 marks for the formula of the calculation of the multiplier. Now, here is the formula for the multiplier. Your multiplier, no matter how you're going to write it, let me have my pen here. Let me try to get my pen. In some other books, they will write this as your multiplier, and then it is equal to 1 over 1 minus your marginal propensity to consume that you see there. We always write it like that. But there's 2 marks for this. Take note of this. When you are asked to calculate the multiplier, there's a mark for the formula. That's how you do it. Now, you then substitute there. Now, you have written 1 over 1 minus your marginal propensity to consume. You will be what? You will be 0.6. And then you calculate 1 minus 0.6, and then you get 1 over 0.4. And then you use your calculator, as you are allowed to come with calculators in the exam. That gives you 2.5. That will be your multiplier. Now, we wanted to know by how much the income will increase. Remember, we said as initial increase in spending result in a proportionally large change in national income. Now we want to know by how much has the national income increased. Now you need to know your multiplier. In this case, we've got our 2,5. Now you take your 2,5 there, you multiply it by the initial spending. Remember we said there's 10 million as the government expenditure, as an injection for the building of new roads. Now when you multiply that 10 million with that 2,5, which is our multiplier, you get 25 million. That's how the national income, that's how much the national income has increased. Now, there are some other formulas that one can use to calculate the multiplier. Let's say you are not given the marginal propensity to consume. You are given something else. Now, to calculate your multiplier, you can even write S. Let me say you are given marginal propensity to save. What you then do, you say 1 over marginal propensity to save. You are done. Now, that's your formula. You use it. It's 1 over, you might have been given the marginal propensity to save. But if you are given the marginal propensity to import again, you just say your multiplier is equal to 1 over marginal propensity to import. If you are given your marginal rate of taxation, you just say your multiplier is equal to 1 over marginal rate of taxation. These are other formulas that you can use to calculate the multiplier depending on what you are given. Now there's also this other formula now which says change in income over change in injection. This is one other formula that you can use to calculate the multiplier, or the change in income over change in leakages. Now let's see. Now a change in income over change in injections. You find a situation like that. This is just an example of what I've just talked about. There is the formula. K stands for multiplier is equal to change. Now when you see that, this is your multiplier is equal to, this smallanyana triangle stands for change in income over change in expenditure. That's what it means. Now, there you have a situation, 40,000, which is an increase, which increases to 50,000. Now, when you look at the change there, you just minus 40,000 from 50,000 in order to get that 10,000. It's your 50,000 minus your 40,000, and then you get your what? Your 1 or your 10,000. Now we talk of investment there, because once you see that capital letter I, it stands for investment. There is increase of 10,000, which is an investment on infrastructure and the development and building of houses. Now that's what is an increase. Now you've got that increase of 10,000, and then when you use your calculator to divide, you get the difference there. Now where you find out that, now that's what your multiplier is. You then end up at that same 2,5 that we have found when we used the other formula. You see it here. It's your 25,000 divided by 10,000, and then there you get your 2,5. So this is one other formula that you can use to calculate the multiplier. Now moving from there, we look at the multiplier on the graph, which is one important thing. There is a graph that we have seen in the books. Now when you draw your graph, you've got your vertical axis, you've got your horizontal axis. On this side is the side for the aggregate expenditure. You see it, aggregate expenditure, as it is indicated there. On this side, it's a side for the total income. Here, we will have your E's there, which stands for expenditure, aggregate expenditure. We talk of total expenditure. Remember, we're dealing with macroeconomics, which looks at the economy as a whole. Here on the side of the total income, you've got your capital letter Y, which stands for your income. Now, please make sure that you label your graph here aggregate income, and this side you label here your total income. It's very important, because you fail to label the axis, you lose marks. So whenever you draw your graph, you must make sure that you do what? You label. Now there is a graph. It indicates the expenditure, it indicates the income this side. Now you've got that line, 45-degree line. Now it represents the equilibrium where your income is equal to what? To your expenditure. It just divides the graph into two equal halves. You remember that if we were doing mathematics, that angle was going to be 90 degrees, and if you divide it into two, it's 45, 45. Now you see now the components of your aggregate expenditure. It's your C, consumption spending by households, I, your investment spending by businesses, G, government spending. That's what makes your aggregate expenditure. Now here you have your E, which is your expenditure. Now if there's initial change in expenditure, initial change in injections, now it shifts. Now this line that you see here, it will shift from here to there. You see a change in investment. This now indicates a change in investment. There you have now E1. You will remember that a shift is indicated. It's E, that is the original aggregate expenditure. Now when there's an increase, you move now to aggregate expenditure, that is E1. Now that results now in the change in income. This a small letter, capital letter Y, and a triangle indicates a change in income. Now when there's a change in aggregate expenditure, that results to a change in income. So when you draw your graph, this is how you should do it. Now remember that these lines are sloping a little upwards. Make sure that they are sloping upwards and they are parallel to each other. Now that's your multiplier on the graph. This is what I've just explained. Now it's just shown in another, format. This is the diagram that I have just explained. Now, if you see here, now that's where they show us now the effect of the multiplier. The diagram below shows the aggregate expenditure function. Increase from A1 to A2. You may have here your A1, you may have here your A2. It shows an increase in aggregate expenditure that I have indicated there. Now, this is what I have explained on the previous slide. Now, all this I have explained that now when there's an increase in aggregate expenditure, that results to an increase in national income. You see, even the gap here, it indicates that it's bigger when you compare it to the gap on this side of the graph. This side is an expenditure, this side is an income. Now, any of these components may result in an increase in expenditure, which results in increase in income. Now, in all, Bantwana Bam, that's what the multiplier is all about. Now, if you look at this slide, now a decrease in tax, increase in expenditure, they result in increase in production, as I have indicated on that example earlier on. That results to an increase in income and therefore increase in your gross domestic product. Now, these are the, causes of an increase in expenditure, which then results to an increase in the national income. That's what kickstarts the multiplier, which then results in the increase in the income of the country and therefore increases the gross domestic product. So this is one of the topics, my good learners, that is a very important for you as you prepare for your paper 1 multiplier, especially the calculation, especially the definition of the multiplier and the relationship between the multiplier and the MPC. Maybe you might have forgotten I said, now the higher the MPC, the higher the multiplier, which then shows that your multiplier will depend on the MPC. I think for now, let's stop right there. We will see each other next time. Thank you very much for your time.